What's up, YouTube? This is Herb Vernacular TV. If you like the content that I'm producing, please like and subscribe to the channel. Today, I want to have a discussion about a subject matter that a lot of news networks don't cover in depthly. And these subject matter are not covered within our community because it's an international related subject matter. Many things within our community is only covered domestically. But today I want to discuss Iran, the P5+1, and the nuclear deal. One thing I must stress is that nuclear proliferation is no exaggeration. As we live within this global community, the proliferation of nuclear weapons is no exaggeration, as we all can see, because the nature of the international system itself is very anarchic. The international system is very anarchic. The system is archaic in its nature and is perpetuated by those that maximize their utilities. So the utilities in the sense that the P5+1, because they control the United Nations, they always get a chance to impose whatever policy to the smaller nation. The United Nations is an institution and body that was created after both World War, after World War II and World War I. If you know from a historical point of view, you know what happened in the two World Wars. Why the two World Wars was fought when European power chasing their colonization, chasing imperial dominance, chasing colonization, colonizing places. These two World Wars was fought. After two World Wars, the United Nations was created. Now the P5+1, the most dominant members in the United Nations, dominated policy. So when we talk about the Iran nuclear deal, a lot of people don't understand what's going on within the deal. When President Obama was in power, he came to an agreement with Iran and the P5+1 to a nuclear deal. The P5+1 in clarity being Russia, China, the United States, Great Britain, France, and Germany being the +1. These are the most powerful nations in the world, controlling how the global world basically work and determining what is what. So when you see Iran, a nation over there in the Middle East, she is a second-tier power trying to dominate our region in her own regards. And since the international system being anarchy, as I say, is anarchy, everybody is chasing a nuclear weapon. This is a nuclear armed race. States are chasing nuclear weapons because it provides security from being dominated by imperial power, dominated by outside power. So nuclear proliferation is no exaggeration. You see countries such as North Korea. She has developed a nuclear weapon basically for her survival. The regime in North Korea looking at its nuclear weapon as it means of survival. Kim Jong-un looking at having a nuclear weapon as his means of survival, because the conflict between the North and the South and the United States is ongoing. So having a nuclear weapon will prevent any kind of military invasion, as North Korea is, strategizing and looking at it from a strategic point of view. Just like Iran, the nuclear deal with Iran, former President Donald Trump, he withdrew from the JCPOA, the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, to curb Iran nuclear activity, nuclear ambitions, nuclear weapons ambitions. Trump withdrew from the deal and still expected Iran to still in the deal, with Israel and its policy maker and its lobbyists lobbying the United States and Congress to abandon the deal. From Israel Prime Minister Netanyahu, he opposed the deal. He opposed any kind of signatory deal with Iran, because that means that United States and Iran would be throwing their relationship off. And if you know it, but the Iran and the West relationship, it had been going on for a long time, since 1979, when the Shah was disposed, and the Ayatollah Khamenei and his regime and his ideology came to power. That theocracy that is in Iran today as a government established since 1979. So they opposes many Israeli and American interests in that region. As conversation is taking place with Hezbollah in Lebanon opposing Israel. You got Yemen with the Houthis opposing Saudi Arabia. So that discourse is happening. Then you have, they say, Iran allegedly is supporting Hamas and Fatah in Palestine, in Gaza. That conversation is taking place. That United States feels like, United States and Israel and some European powers feel like Iran is spreading itself, is becoming a hegemonic power in that region. Iran poses a threat to Israel hegemonic power, also poses a threat to Saudi Arabia hegemonic power in that region. So that's what this conversation always taking place on the Iran nuclear deal. But one thing we shouldn't get sidetracked is that nuclear energy, as according to the NPT, the Non-Proliferation Treaty, nuclear energy is entitled to every state, every signatory of the the Non-Proliferation Treaty. Every state is required to get nuclear energy if they got the capacity and the means to do so. And the treaty, the NPT, stated that countries with more advanced technology and energy source should help the smaller country in developing. But we are living in the international context. Imperial power, most powerful nations going to want to dominate the conversation. So it's the survival of the fittest race. The international system is very anarchic. Every nation, every regime is chasing its security survival. It's no different than Iran. Iran is chasing the theocracy survival. So in the sense that if they get nuclear weapons, they can push back against Israel. They can push back against the United States for any type of invasion. But the crazy thing about it, if Iran does pursue a nuclear ambition, then you got Saudi Arabia wants its nuclear ambition to be carried out. So nuclear proliferation is no exaggeration. Then we have Pakistan. Pakistan have nuclear weapon. Then we have Israel. Israel also have nuclear weapon. So now we got Germany with nuclear weapons, Russia with nuclear weapons, France, Great Britain. Not Germany. Germany do not have nuclear weapons because after the Nazi regime was kicked out, United States stationed her forces over there, so those Nazi element can't come to power anymore. So Germany is the +5. She do not have nuclear weapon, but you got France, you got Great Britain, the United States, Russia, China. All these nations want nuclear weapon. You got Japan. Since the Imperial were kicked out since World War II, Japan can't get a nuclear weapon as well. But she got a nuclear ambitions. All these international actors, all these nations, they're all chasing a nuclear armed race because this nuclear armed race in many sense might provide security. So as we look at the JCPOA, the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, we got to look at Iran's side, and we got to look at the United States, Israel, and Saudi Arabia side. Why they opposing Iran getting nuclear weapons? Because it's a proliferation. Great power like the P5+1 do not want other nations to grow in this nuclear capacity because they're going to rival those nations. So this is international politics. You don't want your opponent to grow. You want to subvert them. Disallow them to grow in any way possible. So it's the same thing with the Iran situation. Iran is entitled to nuclear energy, but is Iran entitled to nuclear weapons? That's what is being, that's the conversation being had, and the P5+1 thing not. Because if Iran get nuclear weapons, she will pose more threats. She will pose more pushback to Israel, pose more pushback to American interests and geostrategic interests in the region of the Middle East. So that's how I look at the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, the nuclear deal. Now with a new regime in power, a new government in power in Iran, and they're going to oppose the new terms of the JCPOA. So this nuclear arm race is nothing to joke with. Nations are running forward to a nuclear arm race because It's a survival of the regime, the survival of the state. So we should look at it in those regards.